February 20, 2025, Carroll County, Georgia. In the early morning hours before dawn, had fully lifted over suburban Carrollton T Road, a call comes into the emergency services. On the line is 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick. With a trembling voice, she tells the dispatcher that something terrible has happened inside her home. A few minutes later, the first patrol units arrive at the Singlestory house at 1531. Inside, officers find Christine and James Brock. The couple is lying on their bed, both having sustained fatal gunshot wounds to the head and torso. At first glance, investigators note there are no signs of forced entry. Windows are intact, doors aren't kicked in, and the rooms are in perfect order. Personal belongings and valuables remain untouched, immediately ruling out a random burglary. The only odd detail at the scene is one of the interior doors, left slightly ajar, as if someone had rushed out. The weapon used in the shootings isn't found anywhere in the house. In the eerie quiet of the bedroom, officers hear a steady, repeating electronic beep. It's a pacemaker implanted in James Brock, still sending rhythmic signals, a device quietly marking the moment his heart stopped. Later, Sarah Grace Patrick will tell investigators that she heard that distinct beep during the night, but she claimed she dismissed it, assuming it was some faulty device and didn't go into her parents' bedroom. At that point, police do not yet suspect that this electronic witness will become one of the key clues in a case that will soon split the entire community into two opposing camps. Hey everyone, before we dive into today's story, I just want to ask you to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and drop a comment down below. I put a lot of effort into bringing you real true crime cases from all around the world, only authentic stories here. Your support really helps the channel grow, and I truly appreciate any interaction. While daylight slowly creeps over the house on Carrollton T Road, forensic teams begin a detailed sweep of the rooms. In the master bedroom, Christine and James Brock lie on the bed in positions that suggest they were at rest. The nature of their wounds indicates that the aggressive act was sudden, most likely occurring while the couple slept. There are no signs of a struggle on their bodies. No so-called defensive wounds that would show someone tried to shield themselves. The bedding isn't disturbed. Nightstands aren't overturned, and the furniture remains in place. Detectives move methodically through the house, checking every potential point of entry. All the windows are locked tight from the inside. The front and back doors show no signs of forced entry, no fresh scratches near the locks, no chipped door frames, no impact marks. That turns the scene into what investigators refer to as a closed environment. In such conditions, the theory of a random intruder wandering into the neighborhood becomes less and less likely. A typical break-in usually leaves behind some level of chaos. Shattered glass, overturned furniture, but here the order remains almost undisturbed. The search for the weapon becomes a key focus for the investigative team. Officers check closets, look under the bed, sift through trash bins, and sweep the area surrounding the house. No firearm is found in cases like this. 2 people found in the same bed. Investigators often consider the possibility of a crime followed by the person responsible ending their own life. But the absence of the weapon immediately eliminates that scenario. Whoever pulled the trigger left the scene with the gun, leaving investigators with no immediate way to trace its owner. One detail stands out: a single door, left slightly ajar when officers arrived. There's no sign of tampering. It simply wasn't latched shut. For investigators, that detail becomes central to building their chain of reasoning. The person behind the act didn't need to force entry. Either they had their own set of keys or they knew for certain the door would be left unlocked. A close look at the interior confirms there was no search for valuables. Drawers weren't opened. Electronics and wallets remained untouched. The person who entered had a specific goal. Everything points to someone who knew the layout of the home and was familiar with Christine and James' routine. This leads investigators to narrow their focus to individuals who were either part of the couple's inner circle or had regular access to the residence. During the initial round of questioning, a critical detail comes to light. Something Sarah Grace Patrick had left out when speaking to emergency services. She wasn't the first person to see what had happened. That was actually 6-year-old Jay. At sunrise, Jay had walked into her parents' bedroom and discovered the scene. Investigators note this as a potential attempt to manipulate the timeline. In her emergency call, Sarah framed the situation as if she were the only one who had witnessed the aftermath firsthand. Detectives begin analyzing the layout of the home. Sarah's room is located right next to her mother's bedroom. According to her statement, she heard some kind of rhythmic electronic sound during the night, but didn't leave her bed. Investigators are particularly interested in the timing. Why did a 17-year-old allow her younger sister to walk straight into a room where such a brutal act had just taken place? Reports note that Sarah made no effort to stop Jay or shield her from what she was about to see. This moment becomes the foundation of the prosecution's theory that the events may have been in part orchestrated. When officers first arrived, Jay was in a state of severe shock. Meanwhile, her older sister appeared composed and level-headed. If Sarah had prior knowledge of what had happened, her inaction starts to look like staging, setting up a chance discovery. But the biggest red flag remains the sound. Forensic testing confirms that the shots would have been clearly audible throughout the house. The contradiction between the physical volume of those gunshots and Sarah's claim of hearing only a soft beeping, which she assumed was a broken appliance, becomes the key reason authorities reclassify her status to that of a suspect. 2 weeks after the events inside the Brock residence, the Carroll County community gathers at a local church for the memorial service. The funeral of Christine and James Brock is no longer a private matter. The service is streamed live online, drawing millions of views. At the center of it all stands 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick. She appears in a pale blue dress. Observers note her red, puffy eyes and tense body language when she takes the podium to deliver her eulogy. She speaks directly to those inside the church and to viewers watching the live stream. She describes Christine Brock as flawed but real, focusing on simple, intimate moments like how her mother brushed her hair every morning. When speaking about James Brock, she calls him the best stepdad in the world. But what really grabs the attention of investigators comes at the very end of her speech. Sarah Grace finishes with a barely audible phrase, "I'm sorry." That short sentence instantly stirs debate. Some relatives and members of the church community interpret it as an expression of deep grief, a natural reaction to losing both parental figures. But others in attendance point out that her delivery felt calculated, even rehearsed. The divide in public perception of Sarah Grace Patrick becomes even more evident after a statement from her cousin. The relative claims Sarah's tears during the memorial were staged and that her entire public appearance was more of a performance than a genuine expression of grief. Investigators still actively collecting evidence take note of these observations. To law enforcement, the viral funeral footage isn't just a record of mourning. It becomes a tool for behavioral analysis. One key question arises: was Sarah Grace's speech a heartfelt message of sorrow or a carefully constructed narrative meant to sway millions of viewers and divert suspicion? To fully understand what happened, investigators dig into the family's history over the past decade. Christine Brock, born in 1983, publicly maintained the image of being the family's rock. But legal records suggest something much more complicated. In 2018, her divorce from Daniel Patrick triggered a series of long-standing conflicts that exposed a darker reality inside the home on Carrollton T. Road. During court proceedings, Daniel leveled serious accusations against his ex-wife and her new partner, James Brock. According to the official transcripts, he claimed that banned substances were used regularly inside the home, even in the presence of the son and daughter. Patrick questioned Christine's ability to provide a safe environment for Sarah Grace and her brother. These concerns were amplified by James Brock's own unstable legal standing at the time, stemming from multiple encounters with law enforcement. School records from that period also reflect the turmoil. Teachers noted that Sarah Patrick had confided in them about experiencing intense anxiety at the thought of returning home. She linked her fear to unpredictable adult behavior and a disturbing atmosphere inside the house. Despite this, the custody dispute ended in a joint agreement. Christine went on to marry James, presenting a picture of family unity to their church community. But the 2018 court documents tell a different story, one rooted in substance-related allegations and deep mistrust. James Brock's legal history stretches back further. In August 2017, he received his first major court ruling. According to official records from Carroll County, Brock was sentenced to 2 years of probation for illegal possession of methamphetamine. During this time, he was under strict supervision, required to stay clean and avoid any actions that could breach the peace. That compliance, however, didn't last long. Between February and April of 2018, Brock committed a series of new offenses, all documented by police. These included retail theft and knowingly receiving property obtained through unlawful means. In addition, he faced charges for marijuana possession and resisting a law enforcement officer. These repeated violations made it clear he had no intention of following the terms of his release and continued to live in direct defiance of court-ordered conditions. Due to the accumulation of repeated violations, the court decided to impose a stricter sentence. James Brock was handed a 3-year prison term, though he ultimately spent just 2 months behind bars. The remainder of his sentence was served under supervised release. His status as a repeat offender, combined with a conviction carrying a sentence of over 1 year, brought irreversible legal consequences. James was permanently barred from purchasing, owning, or possessing any type of firearm. Under Georgia law, even holding a handgun would constitute a serious offense. This legal detail would become pivotal in 2025 when investigators discovered the bodies of James and Christine Brock, but no weapon anywhere in the house. One of the most revealing pieces of evidence pointing to a fractured family dynamic was found in the archives of a civil case. It was a handwritten note from an 11-year-old Sarah Grace addressed directly to the judge. In it, she clearly and firmly expressed her refusal to remain with her mother, pleading to live with her father full-time. This single page became a documented signal that conflict had been simmering for years. Court records also show that the custody battle was marked by ongoing oversight from social services. Sarah repeatedly tried to convince officials that living in the home of Christine and James was taking a toll on her emotional well-being. This letter completely dismantles the image of a perfect family that Sarah portrayed during the memorial service. The truth is, her stay in the Brock household wasn't about love. It was the result of a court-mandated decision. To investigators, that note serves as a key to understanding a long-term motive. Years of forced cohabitation with individuals she had officially described as dangerous had built up pressure from within. The contrast between her heartfelt church speech and the words in that letter is for prosecutors a striking example of her duality. This piece of evidence reinforces the theory that Sarah Grace Patrick had been living a double life, playing a role she had grown to deeply resent. By February 2025. In August 2022, about 2.5 years before the fatal incident, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office received an official complaint from James Brock. He filed for a temporary protective order, citing a direct threat to his safety and the safety of his younger daughter, Jay. In court documents, James described an incident that occurred on their property. According to his statement, Christine Brock attempted to hit him with the family vehicle while he was inside a barn. At the time, Jay was in the back seat of the car. This statement brought to light facts the family had carefully concealed from Their church community. James Brock alleged that his wife was regularly misusing prescription medications, leading to erratic and unpredictable behavior. The incident, along with subsequent legal proceedings, ultimately resulted in Christine Brock being hospitalized. Police reports and medical records from that time confirmed that the environment inside the home on Carrollton T Road was marked by ongoing instability. Official documentation points to repeated conflicts that frequently required intervention from authorities. For 14-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick, this period was defined by a constant presence of law enforcement and court representatives inside the home. She was living in the middle of a situation where her stepfather had officially accused her mother of attempted harm and medication abuse. These documented events from 2022 make it clear the Brock residence had ceased to be a place of safety long before the events of February 2025. Social services and the courts were already aware of a family in deep crisis. Yet Sarah remained in that household under the terms of the existing joint custody agreement. After moving in with her father, Sarah's presence in online spaces became notably performative. Her social media began to feature stylized videos that reflected a theme of public mourning. But when investigators forensically analyzed her digital devices, they uncovered a different pattern of behavior. Detectives found that even 2 months before her arrest, Sarah had proactively reached out to creators in the online true crime community. In private messages, Sarah came across not as a grieving daughter, but as a calculated producer. She aggressively pitched her parents' case, claiming it would go viral and become a media sensation. This contrast, public displays of emotion paired with backdoor negotiations over content reach, became a powerful point for the prosecution. She wasn't just processing a loss. She was positioning herself to monetize the tragedy and take control of its narrative. What sealed her fate was the recovery of her browser history. Despite her attempts to wipe data, forensic teams retrieved a series of search queries made just before the incident. Sarah had been researching firearm specs, methods for hiding evidence, how police track movement inside a home, and what forensic traces remain after cleaning. Investigators interpreted this digital footprint as clear evidence of premeditation. The fact that she was planning to turn the crime into a show even before being named a suspect undermined any argument from the defense about ignorance or impulsivity. On July 7 for Swanee in 2025, the investigation reached a turning point. Daniel Patrick received a call from detectives requesting that he bring Sarah Grace Patrick to the Carroll County Sheriff's Office. The official reason given was to obtain a witness statement and return personal belongings belonging to Christine Brock. Daniel agreed and accompanied his 17-year-old daughter to the sheriff's office. The meeting at the sheriff's office quickly shifts into an intense interrogation. For 4 straight hours, investigators press Sarah Grace Patrick with the same questions, repeatedly locking in her statements. Toward the end of the session, officers begin showing her photographs taken inside the bedroom. Images of Christine and James Brock exactly as they were. Found at the scene of the crime. After that, Daniel Patrick steps in and ends the interview. When he directly asks whether his daughter is about to be taken into custody, officers say no, and Sarah Grace is allowed to leave the building. Later that evening, Sarah Grace Patrick leaves the state heading to Alabama to stay with a friend. But just 2 hours after her departure, Daniel receives another phone call. Authorities issue a firm ultimatum. Sarah Grace must be turned over by 10 o'clock a.m. the following morning. If not, they warn that federal resources will be brought in to locate her. That night, Sarah stays with her father and his partner, who drives to Alabama, picks her up, and brings her back to Carroll County. On July 8, 2025, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, with support from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the FBI, officially announces the detention of the suspect, accompanied by her biological father. Sarah Grace Patrick voluntarily arrives at the county jail and turns herself in. She is charged with 2 counts related to a deliberate crime and 2 counts of aggravated assault. Court filings state that the seriousness of the acts allows prosecutors to pursue the case under adult criminal standards despite her being 17. To understand what happened on February 20, 2025, investigators reconstruct the sequence of events inside the house before the call to emergency services. While Christine and James were asleep, the person responsible, someone who knew the layout of the home and had access to a firearm, entered their bedroom. Ballistic analysis confirms the shots were fired at extremely close range, leaving no chance for either of them to wake up. Afterward, the individual focused on removing evidence. The shell casings were taken along with the weapon itself, which has never been recovered. Special attention is given to what detectives believe was a staged scene. One door was left slightly open to suggest a hurried escape by an outsider. In the silence that followed, James's pacemaker activated, recording the precise moment his heart stopped. The steady electronic signal echoed down the hallway, a sound Sarah would later admit she heard, but instead of seeking help, she stayed in her room, later claiming she had been asleep with headphones on. That alibi would eventually unravel through sound testing and forensic analysis. At dawn, the final phase of the plan unfolded. 6-year-old Jay woke up and entered her parents' bedroom, unknowingly becoming a crucial part of her older sister's narrative. It was only after the girl's screams filled the house, creating the perfect backdrop for the discovery of the bodies, that Sarah picked up the phone. In her call to emergency services, she crafted a version of events that completely erased Jay's presence during those critical first minutes. By using her sister's shock in the absence of any forced entry, Sarah tried to steer the investigation in the wrong direction, turning a real act of aggression into what looked like a staged case of self-defense against an unknown intruder. Sarah Grace Patrick is currently being held at a regional detention center. Her request for bail was denied, with the court citing a high flight risk and potential danger to the community. Prosecutors also expressed concern that she might attempt to influence witnesses, including her younger sister, Jay. The family remains divided in their interpretation of the events. Daniel Patrick disputes the investigators' conclusions, calling the evidence circumstantial. He claims there were signs of forced entry and suggests the crime may be linked to outstanding debts owed by the victims to individuals involved in the distribution of banned substances. Dennis Nolan also defends his granddaughter, describing her as a disciplined teenager with no history of psychological issues. Sarah Grace. Patrick is set to stand trial as an adult. Under Georgia law, the maximum penalty for a double homicide is life in prison without the possibility of parole. The weapon used in the crime has yet to be found. Jay Lee has been placed under the care of extended family. Law enforcement continues to investigate the possibility of accomplices, leaving the final chapter of this story still unwritten.